this is the Compiègne Glade, which is some woodland about 50 miles north of Paris. And this very spot here is where the Armistice was signed for the First World War, and you can just see a group of French school children. They've just been taught about it, because this site is one of the most important sites in the history of Europe, because this is where the French, the British and the German came on the 11th of November 1918 and signed the Armistice to end the First World War and to stop the horrendous slaughter of millions of men and women throughout 4 years of war. And so the Armistice, the word Armistice, is related to this place in particular. And in this forest there was a railway, and a railway carriage drew up there, and that's where the Germans and the British and the French met to sign to end the First World War. And they did that with a statement, and the statement was, and this statement went out to everybody, to millions of soldiers on both sides, so that they would stop fighting. And the statement was, hostilities will cease at 1100 hours today, 11th of November. Troops will stand fast on the line reached at that hour. There will be no intercourse of any description with the enemy. Further instructions will follow. And that message then had to go out. The armistice was signed at 5:20 a.m. and by 11 a.m. The war had to stop. So that message had to get out to millions of soldiers on both sides, and that was difficult. A lot of soldiers, they were able to use radio and telephone to pass the message on, but some of the soldiers, especially the advanced British and French armies, were sort of harder to get hold of, and there weren't telephone lines laid down, and there weren't radios, so it was difficult to get that message. So they had to use runners, and that's the story of my book, Armistice Runner. Armistice Runner is about two people. It's about a girl today, Lily, who finds out her great-great-grandfather was a runner in the First World War, a trench runner. And a trench runner was someone who had to memorise a message and then take that message from one officer to another officer to pass information on when they were unable to use telephone or radio during warfare. So that's what the story is about. And I wanted to include that moment, which relates so closely to this place, in my story, Armistice Runner. So I'm just going to read you a very short passage from the book. So Lily is the girl, and she's reading Ernest's diaries. And Ernest was the trench runner, and he's sent by his officer to get instructions to know what to do next in the war, and he has no idea that the armistice has been signed. I reached HQ about 7:30 hours. I could sense something was up. I could hear singing, like they'd all gone mad. Runner from Captain Whitaker, I reported to the Major. Captain Whitaker requesting information and permission to push on, sir. The Major looked at me. He was seated, his feet up on an ammunition box. At first I assumed he was injured, but there was no sign of bandages. Permission denied, Private, the Major said, lifting a tin cup to his lips. Report back to Captain Whitaker and inform him of the following. Hostilities will cease at 1100 hours today, 11th of November. Troops will stand fast on the line reached at that hour. There will be no intercourse of any description with the enemy. Further instructions will follow. Sir, I asked, unsure of what he meant. It's over, Private. The Major grinned. Then he passed me his mug. Finish this, son, and here's to your health. So that is the message Ernest is given in Armistice Runner, and he then has to run back to his captain, Captain Whitaker, and tell him the information. But that information had to get out quickly. Unfortunately, even on the last day of the First World War, 2,738 men died on the last day. And my story is about Ernest, who is sent out to try and reach the men who are at the farthest extremities, the hardest to reach, to tell them in time. And particularly a group of men who are stranded in a bunker, 6 men, and Ernest has to reach them to try and stop them attacking the Germans, which would lead to their death after the end of the war, so after 11 a.m. And that's the idea behind the story, and that's why it's really important for me to come to this place and see it and listen to it. And if you listen to for a moment to what it's like here. It's a place of peace and a place of birdsong, and a place which brought the end to a terrible time in the First World War. However, there is a footnote to the story of this. In 1940, after Germany had defeated France, most of France in the First World War, Hitler came here, and Hitler wanted to come here, and he came here to the railway carriage, which is here, which is kept in the museum just over there. And Hitler eventually destroyed the railway carriage, and it was important for him to come to this place, and he used this place. He made this the place where he had France sign their surrender in the Second World War. So it's Hitler had a strong feeling of hatred towards France and towards how the Germans were treated at the end of the First World War. So he chose this very significant place to end another war. But fortunately, he was defeated as well. Anyway, thank you for listening to that film. I'm going to make another film now and go into the museum there and try and speak a little about the carriage where the armistice was signed.